Why is change so difficult?
Oh, it is so difficult. Partly because it depends on our motivation and our drive and our understanding. And that comes into our basic, really, it's our limbic system in our brain. It's our behaviors and our emotions that really will allow us to drive us towards change. But habits are hard because they're ingrained in our nervous system and in our neural networks. And the analogy I like to give people is if you are on a nice big pristine slope of fresh snow and you want to go down on your toboggan down this big hill, if you're the first person on the hill and it's all fresh snow, you can go in whatever direction you can point your little sled in. But if you start to have a whole bunch of people that keep coming down the hill, you're going to get crisscrosses in the tracks. And eventually you're going to get into a track that once you get in it, it's been repeated so many times, it's actually hard to get out of that track. And it's a little bit of an analogy for how the nervous system works, is that through repetition with our behaviors, the things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis, we create this neurological, I'm going to say, pattern where we eventually, the patterns become so strong, we really don't have to think about it a lot. It's relegated in a way to a much lower level of thinking from an effort standpoint. So take brushing your teeth with your dominant hand, okay, as an example. That's pretty easy for us now. But if you have a 4-year-old watching them brush their teeth, it's pretty painful. And if we want to be reminded as how hard it is, try brushing your teeth tonight with your opposite hand and see how hard that is to coordinate it. And that's because with the repetition, we have these neural networks developed. So in creating change, it's a lot like going down that sled on the hill. It takes effort to get you up and out, and you have to really think and put a lot of mental energy into it to unhook the neurons from one direction and move them and hook them into another direction. And that requires repetition as well until that neural network starts to get very, very strong. And that's one of the reasons why change is so hard. The second time it's really hard is to recognize where are we in the whole process of change. And there's a book called Changing for Good by Prochaska, and there's a group of psychologists that did this book, which I love. And the book really talks about that at any one point in time, only 20% of the population is actually ready for change. The rest of the time, we're actually in other stages. We don't either know we need to change, or we may get a hint that we need to change, but we're not really putting a lot of effort into it. Or it may be that we're thinking about change and we're going to do something about it in the next 30 days, but we haven't actually started. And those are the first 3 stages. The fourth stage is actually when you're doing change. So you're actually in that process of making change. And that requires, habits, repetition, and it requires time doing the same thing. And within that, it also requires sometimes some support with friends and family. It may mean changing our environment. Hence, don't go to a smoky bar if you're a smoker, because the tendency is you're going to get overwhelmed and you're going to want to smoke. Don't put yourself in that situation. Or I like to say, if you're trying to drop weight, don't buy the foods you know you're going to eat if you have them in the house and you know you shouldn't. It's pretty simple. So that's changing the environment. And then being in a supportive environment. So being around people that are doing the same thing as you, because that way you kind of know where everyone's at and you can support each other through that change. So Alcoholics Anonymous, as an example, is a tremendous support step process. Once we get through change, then we need to maintain it. So we go from this stage of not knowing what we don't know to knowing something that we don't know to then knowing it, but we have to think about it as we're learning something new. Then we start to eventually get to the point of where we don't have to think, we automatically are, and we're completely different. It's a new way of life, and that is the way it is, and you're at that, I'm going to say, that transformation stage.